I've said this before and I'll say it again. My all-time favorite pieces of lost media to search for are the ones that have history to them, an importance within the fan base, or a story that needs to be told. When I searched for the Kappa Mikey MTV pilot a few years ago, it became an obsession of mine to document its early history and sent me back in time through the fandom. Today's topic exists in a similar way to this, for the fact that it's a memorable piece of work that has met an unfortunate fate, and it too became an obsession of mine whose story needs to be told. Something so lost, so tragic, and so mysterious that it might remain that way forever. I want to introduce you to the lost pilot of Jimmy Two Shoes. But you might be asking yourself, what's Jimmy Two Shoes? Jimmy Two Shoes was a Teletoon cartoon that aired in the late 2000s and early 2010s on a variety of different channels, including Disney XD here in the US. While the show itself wasn't super popular, and nowadays I'm sure most people have either forgotten about it or never seen it, that's not the fascination I have with it. Years ago, I was browsing articles on the Lost Media Wiki and came upon one for a lost pilot to Jimmy Two Shoes. Well, not so much a pilot exactly, but more of a test animation paid for by investors. This test was said to be around 6 minutes long and only shown behind closed doors, never on TV. The most important detail about this test, however, and why I've become interested in it, is for the content within. Unlike the final Jimmy Two Shoes cartoon, which was made for kids, the original test was aimed at an older audience. The premise involved Jimmy getting hit by a bus and dying in the hospital from his injuries. However, instead of being sent to heaven, he accidentally gets sent to hell. The irony is that Jimmy sees hell as a wonderful place, not fully realizing what it actually is. Some concept art depicts earlier character designs, including Heinous, originally named Lucifer, and Heloise as a spirit of a serial killer. If you are anything like me when it comes to earlier iterations of cartoons, then you're probably wondering where you can watch this in action, and unfortunately I'm here to tell you that you currently can't. The existence of this test animation has been known about for years, and continues to circulate, but we've yet to uncover any of its animation. But this is where I come in. I can't sit back knowing there's a pilot out there of this magnitude that's still lost. How has no one tried looking for this before? It was time to embark on the search and get this thing found. When it comes to looking for cartoon pilots or earlier iterations of media, the first place I look to is the creators themselves, but not necessarily with the hopes that they actually have it. In my experience of searching for things like this, the creators almost never have their own work for a variety of different reasons. However, it's still worth reaching out to gain more context about the piece, and to possibly get more names of past colleagues to follow up with who might have it. So as expected, my first contact was with Edward K., one of the co-creators of the series. I gave him the rundown of what I was trying to do, and he delivered some unfortunate but expected news. Edward stated that the test animation itself was property of the investors, so he wasn't allowed to keep a copy, and he doesn't know any way to see it. Further stating, it's likely the piece doesn't exist anymore. Worried and a little confused by that last part, I reiterated and asked if there's anyone who might have a copy, and while he didn't know anyone off the top of his head, it indeed could be out there somewhere, he confirmed. This means it's time to widen the search and start looking into animators or concept artists who might have been hired to assist in the test animation's production, and we already have a lead to one of them from the Lost Media Wiki article. The concept art that gave us our first look at the design of the test is the work of character designer Phil Postma. He's still in the design business and wasn't too hard to reach at all, so I sent him a message feeling pretty confident that he'd have some information for me. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, as he reconfirmed what Edward said about the pilot being lost, though was open to answer any questions I had about it. I asked a couple including if he knew how many other people worked on it, or who he turned over his concept art to for approval, but it was too long ago for him to remember, and he couldn't recall any details. Things were starting to get a little more difficult, as it seemed like the people who would have been directly involved with the test didn't really provide any information that could be used to find it. From this point, I decided that I needed to widen my search again and start reaching out to producers of the final show, with the hopes that they'd seen the test as a reference, or maybe even worked on it too, as we've only confirmed Edward and Phil having been connected to it at all at this point. My first stop with this new objective was that of the main series director Kyle Marshall, who worked on both seasons of the show and is very much still involved with animation and works on the Loud House at Nickelodeon. While I was searching for the Lost Captain Mikey pilot, it was the director of that series who ended up having a copy in his archives, so I was thinking this might be a similar instance to that. Thankfully, Kyle is really accessible, and with a lot of hopes riding on this lead, I sent him an email and heard right back. While he knew what I was talking about and remembered working on the show, he doesn't have a copy of the test and also doesn't know where I could find it. Yet again, an early crew member who doesn't have the test in their archives. I was discouraged by this news, but I kept going with the idea of contacting early crew, having found a couple more background and concept artists on the final show. While I never heard back from one of them, the other one states that he's never heard of it before. It really felt like this could have been the end of the search, with my biggest leads coming up empty-handed, and not really having a direction to continue with myself. However, I decided to check in with Edward again to tell him the progress I had made, and ask again if there was anyone else I might have missed that would be worth contacting. And then, the biggest lead yet had been revealed. Edward stated that Sean Scott, the co-creator of the series, was actually the person who directly animated the test. I recalled seeing Scott's name in the list of crew members for the show, but failed to find contact for him at the time, so I brushed him off. Though, the way Edward explained it, Sean didn't have a lot of online presence and could be hard to get a hold of. While I was prepared to dig as far as I needed to for any bit of contact info, Edward gave me the name of Sean's old animation company, though wasn't sure if it was still active or even useful. Ironically, this became the most useful piece of information of the search, as I quickly found some of Sean's accounts through the company name and contacted him in a DM asking about the Jimmy Two Shoes test. Honestly, I wasn't expecting him to reply at all, considering how elusive he seemed to be, and the fact that this pilot seems to be non-existent. But he did reply, and pretty quickly at that. However, the news was not what I was hoping for. Sean seemed really happy to reply, and remembered animating the test at the time, but says he hasn't seen it in over 14 years. There were some details he recalled, such as the voiceovers being temporary, and the animation being rushed in some places. He continued on with the same story that had been passed around online, and that Edward confirmed for me earlier, that the test was funded by investors and not owned by them. Finally, he told me that he accepts the fact that it's lost, and says that it's essentially a product of its time, and not really worth digging up nowadays. While I can understand the reasons why he's not a big fan of it, and respect his opinion of it, I still wanted to get it unearthed and archived for the sake of lost media. Making sure there was nothing left Sean could do to help me, I asked if there were any other leads I could look into, when he stated that there was nothing else he could do to help me, and that this was the end of the road. It was starting to look pretty bad, but I didn't want to pack it in just yet, as from my experience searching for lost media, I knew there was one more avenue to try, albeit an unlikely one. Through the whole search, there has been one consistent story, that there were investors involved with the project who funded the test animation and was turned over to them, becoming their property. This means that there's a chance whoever these mystery investors were could still have a copy and possibly release it, as the series has since become pretty irrelevant. We would just have to get in contact with them. Unfortunately, the one issue with this scenario is that no one really knows who the investors were, and Edward was the only one who thought it could have been WB, but wasn't 100% sure on that. However, even if it was WB, the chance of locating these exact people seems really unlikely. But there was another entity who you might have forgotten about through all this searching, and that's Teletoon, the original channel Jimmy Two Shoes aired on. I began thinking that there was a chance some programming director at Teletoon had seen the test or archived a copy, as I said the series was being made for them. This would mean if I could find someone who dealt with the channel's original programming from around the time the pilot was made, then there's a chance it might be accessible. I did some digging around in attempts to find anyone remotely connected to original programming for Teletoon, and to my surprise, I was able to locate one productions manager from 2006, the same year the test was made. It seemed to me like this guy was the one to ask about such a thing like a pilot, so I found some of his contact info and sent him a message. He hasn't responded to me yet, but it looks like he's not too active on social media, so maybe he'll see my message someday. Only time will tell. I did find a couple smaller leads in the meantime, including some more early artists who worked on the main series, but they also haven't replied, and based on what I said before about crew members not having copies, I doubt they do either. Unfortunately, that ends the research and looking for this lost test for now, and I'm really unsure if the whole thing will ever resurface. I always like to look on the positive side of lost media, and feel a sense of confidence that one day this test will show up. But given the whole investors thing and the fact that so many big crew members don't even have a piece of it, that can be hard to do. Though it's also possible that this video will reach the right people and maybe it will show up one day, as that's happened with a few of my videos in the past. I still think it's important to save this piece of animation history, and it'd be really fun checking out the cartoon in such a different way. Until that happens though, the Jimmy Two Shoes test animation will remain a mystery. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other game-related lost media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.